Around the World in 80 Days. London, October 2nd, 1872. Mr. Phileas Fogg is an English gentleman. He lives in London. He hasn't got a wife or children, but he has got a France servant, Passepartout. Fogg goes to his club every day. He eats at his club at 12 o'clock. In the afternoon, he reads there. In the evening, he eats there again. Then he talks with his friends, and at midnight he goes home. Passepartout is happy. He wants a quiet job. But one evening, Fogg sees something interesting in the Times. At the club, Fogg's friends talk.
"That gentleman thief can't go far,"
says Ralph.
"With trains and ships, today's detectives move fast."
"But thieves can move fast too,"
Flanagan says.
"Today you can go round the world in 80 days,
says Fogg.
"Do it, and I pay you £20,000.
says Stewart.
I'm leaving tonight."
Answers Fogg.
"Perhaps I can't do it, Stuart. But then I pay you £20,000.
The train for France leaves before 9 in the evening. Fogg must be back in London by December 21st. Fogg gives £20,000 in a bag to his servant.
We're leaving for France,"
he says. Passepartout isn't very happy. They go to France. Then they take a train to Italy and a ship to port set in Egypt. When their ship arrives in Suez, an English detective, Mr. Fix, is waiting. He's looking for the gentleman thief. Fogg visits the passport office. Mr. Fix sees him there.
"It's the gentleman thief.
He thinks.
I must tell London."
Fix looks at Passepartout.
"Where are you going?"
He asks.
"Around the world,"
says Passepartout.
"but right now I need some new shirts."
Fix takes him to a shop and leaves him there. Then he sends a telegram to London. Later he goes on the ship for Bombay with Fogg and Passepartout. It is October 20th. They all arrive in Bombay 2 days early. At 4:30 in the afternoon, Fogg and Passepartout leave the ship. They want to get a train across India to Calcutta. It leaves at 8 o'clock. First, Fogg goes to the passport office. Then he eats at the station. Passepartout visits the temple at Malabar Hill, but he doesn't take off his shoes. The priests get angry. They take his shoes and Passepartout runs away. Fogg and Passepartout get on the train, but Fix stays in Bombay. He is waiting for a telegram from London. After 3 days, the train stops. The railway from Colby to Allahabad isn't ready. Some men are building the railway, but there are 80 kilometers without a railway between Colby and Allahabad. In Colby, Passepartout gets some new shoes. He also finds an elephant to take them to Allahabad. They stop near a temple in the village of Palaji. The old Indian prince is dead. His young wife, the princess, must die with him in a big fire.
"We must help that woman,"
says Fogg. The priests start the fire. Through the smoke, Fogg sees something beautiful. The prince stands up and takes the princess out of the fire. The prince and the princess come nearer. Fogg sees that the man is not the prince. It is Passepartout in the prince's clothes.
"Quickly! Let's go!"
says Passepartout to Fogg. Suddenly the priests see the prince's body on the fire. They see that the man in the prince's clothes is not the prince, and they become angry. Fogg, Passepartout, and the princess leave very quickly on the elephant. At last they arrive in Allahabad. Fogg buys some European clothes for the princess.
"What a beautiful woman,"
he thinks. On the train going to Calcutta, she speaks for the 5th time.
"My name's Mrs. Aouda. Thank you for helping me. But I don't know what to do now. I can never go home."
"We can take you to Hong Kong,"
Fogg says.
"Thank you,"
says Mrs. Aouda.
"I have a cousin there."
At Calcutta station, a policeman stops them. He takes them to see a judge. Mrs. Aouda goes too. Fix is in Calcutta. Detectives must move fast to find gentleman thieves. He's waiting in court, but Fogg and his friends don't see him.
Why are we here?
For breaking the rules in a temple.
Says the judge.
In Pelagi?
Asks Fogg.
No. In Bombay.
Says the judge. And he put Passepartout's shoes on the table.
You must go to prison for this.
Says the judge. But Fogg gives £2,000 to the court and they're free again. They get onto the ship for Hong Kong. Fix follows them, but Passepartout sees him.
Perhaps he's a detective.
He thinks.
Perhaps he's working for Mr. Stewart from the Gentlemen's Club in London.
In Hong Kong, Mrs. Uda learns that her cousin now lives in Holland.
Come with us to Europe.
Fogg says. Passepartout wants to buy 3 tickets on the Carnatic. It leaves for Yokohama, in Japan, the next morning. But at the ticket office he learns that it's leaving early, that evening. Passepartout meets Fix near the ticket office.
Come for a drink,
Says Fix. Fix tells Passepartout.
I think your Mr. Fogg is a gentleman thief and I want to arrest him.
Passepartout doesn't want to help Fix, but the detective buys drink after drink. Passepartout goes to sleep on the table.
Now he can't tell Fogg about the Carnatic.
Thinks Fix.
It leaves tonight, but without Fogg.
Later Passepartout wakes up. He goes on to the Carnatic and the ship leaves, but Fogg and Mrs. Uda aren't with him. Next morning Fogg and Mrs. Uda go to get on the Carnatic. But it isn't there. Fix arrives.
The Carnatic's on its way to Japan,
He says.
and the next ship to Yokohama leaves next week.
Where's Passepartout?
Asks Mrs. Uda.
I don't know,
Says Fogg.
but we must go on without him. We must find another ship.
Fogg finds a small ship, the Tankadier, to go to Shanghai. There they can get a big ship to Yokohama.
Can I go with you?
Asks Fix.
Of course.
Fogg answers. The Tankadier travels through storms, and at last arrives near Shanghai. Suddenly they see a big ship in front of them. It's on its way to Yokohama.
Signal to that ship.
Says Fogg. Passepartout arrives in Yokohama, but he has no money. He leaves the Carnatic and finds work in Mr. Betulker's circus.
I can go to America with the circus.
He thinks. Fogg, Mrs. Uda, and Fix get on the big ship, and a week later they arrive in Japan. The Carnatic is in Yokohama. Fogg and Mrs. Uda go onto the Carnatic. They find Passepartout's name in the book of passengers' names, but they can't find Passepartout. Their ship leaves for San Francisco in a few hours. Before they leave, Fogg goes to the circus. Passepartout sees him there. Fogg wants to take Passepartout with him. But first he must pay Mr. Betulker. At 6 o'clock in the evening Fogg, Passepartout and Mrs. Uda go onto the American ship. Fix follows them.
I'm sorry about Hong Kong.
Says Passepartout.
I don't usually drink much, but
Later Passepartout sees Fix on the ship.
my master isn't a gentleman thief.
He says.
Listen,
Says Fix.
I now have papers from London to arrest Mr. Fogg. But I can't stop him now. It must be in England.
They arrived in San Francisco in the morning. The New York train leaves that evening. Fogg and Mrs. Uda meet Fix in the street.
I am traveling to Europe now. Can we travel together?
He asked.
Of course.
Answered Fogg. Fogg, Mrs. Uda, Passepartout, and Fix get on the train that evening. They cross one old bridge very fast, and it falls into the river behind them. Then some Sioux Indians arrive. They kill some passengers. Passepartout fight them, but they take him and ride away with him. Fogg, Mrs. Uda, and Fix get off the train. Fogg goes to look for Passepartout. He finds him and brings him back. But they must wait until evening, until the next train to New York.
How can we travel fast over the snow?
Thinks Fix. On a sledge with sails. Soon they arrive in Omaha. There they take a train to New York. They arrive in New York 45 minutes late. Their ship, the China, is on its way to Liverpool. The next morning, Fogg, Mrs. Uda, Passepartout, and Fix leave on a small ship, the Henrietta, going to France. Later, Fogg gives the sailors money, and they agree to go to Liverpool, not to France. The sailors lock the captain in his room. The Henrietta is in the middle of the Atlantic, and there's no coal.
Burn all the wood on the ship,
Says Fogg. The ship arrives in Queenstown, in the south of Ireland, and there's no more wood on it.
let's get off here.
Says Fogg to Mrs. Uda, Passepartout, and Fix. Fix doesn't arrest Fogg in Queenstown. He's waiting for them to arrive in England. They get on a train and travel to Dublin. There they get a fast ship to Liverpool. In Liverpool, Fix arrests Fogg at last and takes him to prison. In prison, Fogg looks at his diary. At 2 o'clock, he looks at his watch.
There's time to go to London on a fast train and to be at my club by 8:45 this evening.
He thinks. At 3:30, Fix arrives with Mrs. Uda and Passepartout.
I'm sorry, Mr. Fogg.
Says Fix.
The gentleman thief, James Strand, is in prison. You're free to go.
Angrily, Fogg punches Fix in the face. Then Fogg, Mrs. Uda, and Passepartout run to Liverpool station. They get a fast train to London. The train arrives at 10 minutes to 9. Fogg is 5 minutes late for his meeting with Stewart. Fogg doesn't want to get to his club late, so he goes home with Mrs. Uda and Passepartout. Around the world in 80 days and 5 minutes, he's the loser. He has only £2,000 in the bank, and he must give it all to Stewart.
I'm sorry for bringing you here, to a poor man's home.
He says to Mrs. Uda the next morning.
Will you marry me?
Ask Mrs. Uda.
Yes.
Says Fogg. That afternoon, Fogg tells Passepartout.
I want to marry Mrs. Uda tomorrow, the December 23rd. Can you speak to the people at Marylebone Church about it?
Soon Passepartout returns.
Today's the December 21st. When you travel east around the world, you get an extra day. You are not late for your meeting at the club after all, but you must run.
At 8:45, Fogg enters his club.
I win.
He says to Stewart.
Where's my £20,000?
Next Monday, Fogg, the world traveler, marries Mrs. Uda. He's a very happy man.